I'm sure everyone can remember being afraid of the dark. And even when I say remember being afraid of the dark, I don't care how old you are, there is still a little bit of a fear of the dark. Because here's the thing about the dark. The dark has the unknown factor with it. It carries this unknown factor. Like when we're in the dark, there are some variables. Some things can happen in the dark and they can surprise us and we might not be aware of them. You know, like if you're walking down a dark alley at night, there's this sometimes feeling that there could be someone walking behind you, but you're just not quite sure. But the more you think about it and you can't verify whether or not somebody's behind you or not, that darkness produces some fear, that unknown fear. I remember being, as a kid, like my fear of the dark was really at bedtime, that time where you had to turn out the light at the doorway and then get into bed. And there was some room to cover from the doorway with the light switch to the bed. And there were some issues for me because I was convinced that as soon as the lights went out, that under the bed there were alligators. And so, I mean, like, that's why you can never dangle an arm or a leg off the bed at night when the lights are out, because you might bring back a nub. And once you feed an alligator, they get a taste for kid, and it's all downhill from there. And so, like, you know, turning the lights out and making that mad dash and the dive into the bed in the dark. Of course, then once you're in the bed, there's the realization that the closet door wasn't fully shut. And it's even darker in the closet. What might be lurking in the dark closet? Of course, your mind goes to the clown, the creepy clown. There's a creepy clown probably lurking in my closet. I don't know why the clowns are all lurking in the closets. But it's crazy where your mind will go when there's darkness and there's unknown. I'm noticing this quite a bit in the world that we're navigating today as people talk about, you know, these are dark times and it's a dark world and there is darkness over our world. And there's a lot of dark language and a lot of dark rhetoric. And on our news channels of choice, we're bombarded with these dark messages. And on our social media, we're bombarded with these dark messages. And it just feels like there's this darkness. And of course, it begins to impact the way we speak to each other and the rhetoric that we're sharing with each other. And now we're saying dark things to one another. And it starts like maybe just repeating this darkness that you heard on your news channel of choice or this darkness that you saw on social media, but then it gets amplified as the darkness is repeated by the person you're sharing it with. And it may be directed at something specific, but then it's interesting how that darkness tends to seep into everything. And the rhetoric, the language that is being shared right now, it feels like it's getting darker and darker again. And as we hear that, there begins to feel like there's a powerlessness over what's happening. Like we can't do anything about it. And then what happens out of that? The mind starts to go to crazy places, just like when I was a kid. And the light switch goes out, all of a sudden, my floor turns into water, and there are alligators living under the bed, and there's a creepy clown in the closet. The mind starts to go to crazy places. That's where we get all these conspiracy theories, where the whole world's against us. And there's all the, like the worst possible things are happening. And you let a little darkness in and you start to be owned by that darkness. You start to repeat the darkness and the darkness gets crazier and crazier and crazier. And you're not even aware of it anymore. Pay attention. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. Be careful, little mouth, what you say. It doesn't have to be that way. We can really pay attention because, you see, Jesus said something really cool. No matter how dark we may think the world may get, Jesus made the declaration that he is the light of the world. He is the light of the world. Jesus also told us that he would always be with us and never would he leave us, never would he forsake us. Jesus said that his presence would be with us and he is the light of the world. And so as we encounter this darkness and the fear and all the unreasonable things that we start to associate with that and even begin to perpetuate that darkness, Jesus is doing something really different. Because while we may feel powerless in the darkness, while we may be trying to figure out, what's happening in the darkness, Jesus just dominates darkness. Darkness stands no chance against him because he is light. And so because of that, there's no fear. Jesus is light, and as the love of God enters into us, the perfect love of God drives out fear. And the main reason for that is because he illuminates everything. He shows light. into it. Jesus is the light of the world. Now, our God is in the revealing business, and in this message series called Hi, My Name Is, we are talking about how Jesus is introducing himself to the world. God wants to make himself known. Our God is a relational God, relational through and through, and he wants everyone to know him, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, no matter what's been done to you. God is madly, passionately, head over heels in love with you. That's a woohoo moment, by the way, if you didn't know it. I feel like sometimes in the dark world, even when we get to that point, I've seen some darkness, get seeping into the corners of the church where people are like, well, that sounds all fine and good, but not those people. You say this no matter who you are, or no matter what you've done, or no matter what's been done to you, but surely we're not really going to apply that to everyone. Oh, yes. Whether we apply it to everyone or not, it does apply to everyone because that is the nature and the heartbeat of God. And it certainly applies to you. And so God is revealing himself and making himself known, and he's creating a people for himself where he will be revealed in our world. This is his plan and his strategy. So if you've ever wondered, God, what are you up to? When you get frustrated with the darkness and you're like, God, what are you up to? He's like, I'm up to something really good, and it's called you. I want you to hear that. God says, I'm up to something really good, and it's called you. Think about this. God is up to something really good, and it's called what? You. It's called you. He is the light of the world, and he is making himself known to you. Our memory verse for this series is found in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, where God reveals himself to Moses, and he gives himself a name. I'd love for you to read this out loud as we read it together and work on memorizing it. It says, God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. And so what God is saying here is he's saying, okay, you don't name me, I name myself because I'm the creator. God says, I am who I am. I create, I cause to exist. Our God is the one who spoke everything into existence. And so while religions typically are based on images that men make or people make to somehow portray an image of God, this relational construct that God is inviting us into with him is one where God says, no, I am who I am, and you don't name me. He says, I am. And I am revealing myself to you. And so God is making himself known to us. So when Jesus came to earth, what we find is God in flesh. Jesus came to earth. Jesus is God's son. Jesus is the one who spoke everything into existence. He is the creative force of the Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And Jesus spoke everything into existence. And for God so loved the world that he would send his son Jesus to come here, not to condemn the world, but to save the world. And so when Jesus came, God is speaking our language. It's one of my favorite things about God is God speaks our language. He wants us to understand. And so while there are many mysteries and we have this unchanging yet ever revealing God, he's continually revealing himself to us, and we're getting to see him through this relational construct. And so when it comes to Jesus and the names that he gives himself, well, we're going to dig in a little bit in John chapter 9, the New Testament book of John, the Gospel of John. It tells the story of Jesus, which, by the way, if you've never really read the Bible before, here's a recommendation I have for you. Read the Gospel of John. It's in the New Testament. If you have a Bible, you can just look in the table of contents or even go online or get the YouVersion Bible app and just type in John. And begin in John chapter 1, verse 1, and just pray, God, would you reveal yourself to me? This is one of the cool things about reading the Bible. It's one of the only books I know of that you can talk to the author while you read it. And when you come to something that you don't understand, well, you're in good company. A lot of times people get frustrated because we think we have to figure it out and we have to understand it all. No. That's the thing. I mean, God gives us wonderful answers, but really good answers produce even better questions. And so as God is revealing himself to us, we can encounter him. And so, God, please speak to me through the scriptures and read a little bit and listen and ask him what it means. Talk to somebody else about that. Maybe just read a chapter a day. It'll take you about a month to read through the book of John. And it's a kind of a full picture of the life of Jesus as God is being revealed to us. And so in John chapter 9, what we see is that Jesus gives sight to the blind. Now, this is important because when we talk about darkness, we're talking about not being able to see. We can't see. And so that kind of ultimate version of that darkness would be to be blind. And so while Jesus was here on earth, there were some people who were physically blind, unable to see, and at different times Jesus healed them. And this story is one of those encounters. But then spiritually speaking, we understand that Jesus is offering sight to everyone who is blind. Now, when it comes to like a spiritual blindness, all of us have blind spots. A blind spot is something that we're unaware of, and we can't quite see or understand or pick up on. I would share with you my blind spots, but I don't know what they are. That's why they're blind spots. Now, some of you would be like, oh, I'd be happy to tell you, because they may be really obvious to you, and that's kind of the nature of that. And so one of the things we do is we're trying to cope with our own darkness and our own blindness is sometimes as we look at the blind spots of others and go, can you believe that? Look at that blind spot. What an idiot. What a moron. How could they not see that? How stupid could they be? Well, all the while, we've got our own blind spots that we're completely oblivious to and unaware of. And so that's how we kind of try to cope with that. Well, Jesus is like, hey, I got something better for you. I can just give sight to the blind. To the spiritually blind, to the physically blind, Jesus gives sight to the blind. In John chapter 9, beginning in verse 1, it says, as he went along, this is referring to Jesus, as he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, Jesus said, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Now, here's a little bit of a blind spot that the disciples, the people who were traveling with Jesus as he was preaching good news to the poor and performing miracles and traveling about that region. One of the blind spots the disciples had is in regards to, why like bad things happen. So here is an actual person a man who was born blind, and he was known as one who had to beg because he wasn't able to work. And so this guy was there, and the disciples said, okay, who's to blame for this? And that's one of the things we do when we see, or don't see, when there's darkness and there's blindness and we're trying to figure it out, we want to know who to blame. That's where the rhetoric starts to really build, and it gets worse. It's like, hey, it feels like it's dark, and there's things I don't understand, and so where do I point the finger? Which government officials get the blame? Which type of people are the ones who are responsible for this? Who is it that I'm going to be mad at right now? I do have a great idea for a podcast. It's really good. It's called, Why Are You So Mad? This is the whole premise of the podcast. I just want to interview people who are mad. Shouldn't be hard getting guests. I work in a church, so. And I'm going to ask one question. Hey, Margaret, why are you so mad? And then I just want her to tell me why she's so mad. And then I'll ask a follow-up question. Why are you still so mad? Until we get it all out. I really would like to, why is everyone so mad? If you start thinking about this and start paying attention and really digging in, why am I so mad? It's probably because we're scared. Why am I so scared? It's probably because we can't see. Why can't I see? Maybe it's because I'm blind. Oh, well, what can Jesus do about that? Jesus gives sight to the blind. Can we get a woo-hoo there? We don't have to be mad because we don't have to be afraid. Because we don't have to be blind, because Jesus gives sight to the blind. And he sets us free from this. And so in this story, the disciples are like, we got to know who's to blame, the man or his parents. Who sinned to cause this blindness? Which is an interesting thing. He was born blind, so I'm not sure what this kid was doing in the womb, to sin. Pre-birth, I'm not sure what was going on there, but they're wrestling with, it's just a common question of the day, like, who's responsible for the wheel? Who's responsible? And Jesus says, well, it's not anybody's sin. I mean, this was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. And so sometimes we look at difficulties and challenges and we want to know who's to blame, who sinned, who's responsible for this. There's some opportunities here for illumination. as we experience struggles and darkness in this life, sometimes it is physical struggles, like this man who was born blind, and we have our physical limitations and illness, and we can be like, why is God punishing me? Well, I mean, hey, you know what, these bodies, I'm not sure if you knew this or not, they are in a steady state of decay. What that means is that we're all dying, and the current mortality rate for human beings is hovering right at 100%, and it just doesn't change. And so our bodies are not meant to last. But it still can be scary and terrifying and be like, God, why is this happening? Who's to blame for this? And so here's an opportunity for illumination, for Jesus to shine some light into whether it be our own personal physical struggles or the physical struggles of others. There's the relational struggles that we experience, like when families deteriorate. And you have marriages and families that are torn apart through divorce. And as that happens, I mean, there's obviously a lot of blame that goes on there because it's dark and it's scary. And in that fear, there's that darkness. And so there's this relational struggle. Well, what's kind of neat here is that Jesus, in the midst of even these things and the pain and the turmoil that may be happening there, Jesus can provide illumination. He can help us see. One of the best things is when we can see into how we've contributed to relational challenges, whether it be with a loved one, a family member, a coworker, a neighbor, a client, our boss, friends. When God allows us to see that and we go, oh, it's a really incredible, oh, okay. And then we have the opportunity to be like, all right, I don't have to carry that. I don't have to stay mad. There's financial struggles where Jesus can provide illumination. Like where did I go wrong? Sometimes it's like, where did I go? What did I do wrong? I don't, you know what? Economic systems collapse and fail. I'm not just trying to placate you. I'm just like, here's the reality of the situation. There are companies that have had long, rich histories of success and doing business. And then, there's a change that happens. And isn't it so interesting how fast that whole thing can crumble? The same thing happens to individuals. And one of the things we do is it's kind of wild. Like whenever that happens to somebody, we go, yeah, they deserved it. They weren't very responsible. Well, maybe sometimes that's true, or they made really poor decisions. My goodness, there's an opportunity for some illumination here where we could be like, okay, hold on. There could be some opportunity for some growth, some realization. But I think the greater illumination here is that money's not the answer. And it doesn't last, and it's not our source, and it's not our God. And we probably give it way too much power to define us, and that's why there's so much heartache and hardship regarding that. There's emotional struggles where Jesus can provide illumination, where we may be blind. And it's interesting, there's some really cool things as we're saying, okay, wait a minute, it's okay to feel certain ways, and we should probably identify how we feel and not suppress our feelings so much, but then there's some opportunity here for illumination where we don't have to be defined by our feelings either. You can feel something without being it. It doesn't have to become your identity. You can say, I feel this, but just because I feel this doesn't mean I'm going to choose to act on that or react on that. Instead, I'd like to give a response to how I'm feeling because you know what's interesting? Sometimes the way you feel, it changes. And there's an opportunity for some illumination there. And I am very thankful that the conversation is a lot more open and there's a healthy dialogue around that. But remember, you don't have to be defined by how you feel. There's some illumination that can happen here. And so instead of playing the blame game, and what we have the opportunity to do is say, okay, Jesus can come into this. So here in this situation, the disciples are thinking, well, it's hopeless. The man's born blind. He's always going to be blind. So let's play the blame game. Let's figure out whose fault it is. We look at our world and we're like, it's a dark world and there's problems all around us and we can't fix it and it's hopeless. Whose fault is it? Well, Jesus is like, I have another option for you. Jesus can come in and change things. Jesus gives sight to the blind because Jesus is the light of the world. He is the light of the world. So we're going to come to our I am statement that Jesus makes regarding himself as we continue reading verse 4. He says, as long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. All right, this is incredible. So what Jesus does here is he says, all right, as long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. In other words, when it's dark, we can't work because we can't see. Jesus says, but I am the light of the world. So as long as he was here, he's like, there is light in the world. So this is where I think it gets really kind of exciting. If Jesus is indeed the light of the world, just go with me on this little progression. Jesus is the light of the world. And if you have a relationship with Jesus, then Jesus is in you, and he promises to never leave you nor forsake you. So if Jesus is the light of the world and Jesus is in you, then what does that make you? It makes you the light of the world. Now, this is exciting. And Jesus actually said this. He said, you are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. He also refers to himself and he says, I am the light of the world. But the way that works is we're not the light of the world without Jesus, only with Jesus. But when Jesus is in us, then his light is with us and the works of God can be done through us because it is day and not night. And so when we think about the light of Jesus, there's a few things about it that I think are really important. The light of Jesus is urgent. There's an urgency for it. That's why, here at One Church, we say we want to reach the most people in the shortest time. You may have heard that before. We want to reach the most people in the shortest time. I'll give you the first part, and then I want you to say the second part. We want to reach the most people in the shortest time. Good job. Now, that matters because time matters. It matters. We want to reach the most people in the shortest time. We do that by praying for one. It goes like this: God, please give me one person to share your love with. Would you pray that out loud with me? God, please give me one person to share your love with. Well, time matters. God gives us his love and moves his love through us. And so let's get on with the business of sharing God's love. There's an urgency here. An urgency where time matters and God's love is available. His light is in us. And so now we have the opportunity to share the love and the light of Jesus because it is day. The light of Jesus is also relevant. It's relevant. It speaks to real needs in real ways. So in this story, we have a healing that happens. There is a man born blind that has a real need, and Jesus has ability to meet that need. And so we may go, well, I can't, make blind people see. Well, what can you do? Can you help out a neighbor? Can you give an encouraging word? Can you contribute to the needs of others? Where's the good that you ought to do? Whoever knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them, it says in the Bible. God, he gets me with that one all the time. I'll see some opportunity to do good. Even something as simple as picking up a piece of trash, and I hate picking up trash. And I used to get so mad at all you litter bugs out there, like, how dare you? Why are you ruining this beautiful place that God made for us by throwing your trash? You're inconsiderate. And I would see trash on the ground, and I would actually get mad at people. And God's like, well, why don't you pick it up? I'm like, it's not mine. What am I, 2? I didn't do it. I'm 4 years old now. I didn't do it. She did it. I'm not picking it up. And yet, here's something good that I could do, and I don't want to do it because I don't want to get my hands dirty. Legitimately, I really hate getting my hands dirty. And yet, I'll walk by a piece of trash, and it's like, whoever knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. Lately, he's been getting me with cigarette butts. I'm like, really? We're doing cigarette butts now? Like, those have been on people's lips. Smoker lips. Yeah. So it's one of those, what can you do? We get so focused on what we can't do, but what can you do? Start doing the things you can do, and you'll be amazed at what God might show you. Be amazed at what he might show you. It's relevant. It's incarnate as well. The word incarnate means flesh and blood. So this is how God reveals himself. God becomes flesh and blood. He leaves heaven and comes to earth. Jesus is God in flesh. Jesus is in us, and so Jesus is being revealed through us. And so he is present in our world. He's not a faraway, distant God. He's actually present. If you have a relationship with Jesus, he is present in your home. He is present at your job. He's present in your workplace and in your neighborhood, in your community. He's very present, and the light of Jesus is also effective. This light transforms people. They were one thing, but now they're another. I was blind, but now I see. I was blind, but now I see. That's the story this guy is going to get to tell. Now, it is kind of a cool story. I've always wondered a little bit, like Jesus's method of healing here is a bit interesting to me. Man born blind, he can't see. And disciples are like, whose sin caused this? His parents or his own? Jesus is like, neither, so the work of God may be displayed. And he spits in the dirt. Makes mud, puts it on the man's eyes. I'm pretty convinced this was just so everybody knew the guy really couldn't see. Because I'm telling you right now, if I could see and I was just pretending not to be able to see, and you start coming at me with some spit mud, I'm like, I'm good. He puts the spit mud on the man's eyes and tells him to go wash in the pool, which is an interesting thing. He also allows the man to participate in the healing, which I think is really neat. God invites us to participate with him. He gives them an actionable step. I mean, that's one of the neat things about baptism, as we experience the love of God from the top of our heads to the bottom of our feet, and we're immersed in the water with him, is he's allowing us to participate with him and experience him, a physical expression of these things. He invites us to give. That is a physical expression of what he's doing in us and how he's changing us. And it's so effective and good. And then I think the best part of all is that Jesus shines through us. Jesus is the light of the world. Jesus is in us. Then we are the light of the world. So Jesus shines through us. We continue reading the next verse, verse 8. It says, his neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? Some claimed that he was. Others said, nah, he only looks like him. But he himself insisted, no, I am the man. How then were your eyes open, they asked. And he replied, the man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. Doesn't seem like he knows he spit, but okay. Made some mud and put it on my eyes. And he told me to go to the Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see. Where is this man, they asked him. I don't know, he said. And then it goes on, and he has the opportunity to share his story with larger and larger audience, and even to ask the question, do you want to become his follower too? Do you want to follow Jesus too? Because now he's gonna follow Jesus. His light shines through us. And I love his story. Now that he's got to participate in this, he's able to answer, how did this happen? He said, he put mud on my eyes, told me to go and wash. And notice what he said. He said, I went and washed. I think this is a real key part of this healing and this miracle that happens and this sight being restored. He says, he told me to wash, and what did he do? I went and I washed. This is really important. Jesus gives sight to the blind because Jesus is the light of the world and his light can shine through us. But if our worlds are still dark, maybe it's because he's told us to go and wash and we've not yet gone and washed. He's given us a next step and we haven't taken that next step. The sight and the light may be available to you that can transform and change you. And when it does, people will take notice. The people you used to sit and get angry with, not at, but your cronies. Your crew that rev you up, that watch the same news channel of choice as you, and see the same stories on your social media as you, and share the same conspiracy theories as you, and you just feed right into each other, and you rev each other up, and there's nobody there to go, hold on. And you got all the same common enemies, and all the same people you don't like, and all the same people to blame. Well, wait a minute, what if you could see? You didn't have to be afraid anymore. What if you would go and wash? And in those conversations, even that, you don't have to be mad or angry at that. Instead, you can just sit and go, oh, yeah, no, I'm thinking about that differently now. What do you mean? It'd be fun. They'll get mad at you. It's so much fun. Not to make people mad, just when you get to be the object of it. It's a blast. But they'll ask, what's going on with you? Oh, well, Jesus did something. I was blind, but now I see. I was blind, but now I see. And this miracle is available to you. What's he calling you to do? What does he want to illuminate in your life? What is your next step of faith as you step into the healing and the miracle that he has for you? As we share in a time of communion, we remember how Jesus has provided salvation for us. But his salvation is not just like this one-time thing that he gives us, but he keeps changing us and transforming us and making us new. And so when we have communion together and we eat bread and drink the juice, it's a way of remembering that every day his mercies are new and his grace is available and his grace and mercy are important. And so if you have bread and juice, we'd love for you to eat and drink. But if not, you can still participate in communion by remembering what Jesus has done. He took bread and he broke it and he offered himself. He said, this is my body, which is given to you. And if you're saying yes to Jesus and the work that he's done for us, then we take and we eat together. And he also took a cup. He said, this cup is a cup of a new covenant, a new promise. This relationship that we have with him where he's not only our Savior, but also our Lord, but not just any Lord, the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. And so when we drink from this cup, we drink to the King, to the King. I'd love to pray a blessing over you and have you ask God to show you what your next step is as he brings his healing and light into us so that we can be the light of the world to our world. Father, please show us what to do and give us courage to do it. Thank you that you bring light and you drive out the darkness. We pray that we would hear from you right now, and we ask that in Jesus' name.